was a quiet evening in the small town of Meadowbrook, the kind of evening where nothing seemed to be out of place. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. People were finishing up their work and preparing for a peaceful night. For John, a man in his late 20s, it was just another ordinary evening. He had finished his shift at the local hardware store and was heading home, looking forward to a simple dinner and a few hours of relaxation. As John walked along the empty road, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another plane flying high in the sky. But this was different. The object was too low, moving too fast, and it wasn't following the normal flight path of planes. John's curiosity piqued. He stopped in his tracks and squinted his eyes at the unusual sight. The object was bright, a strange mixture of blue and silver, with flashes of light trailing behind it. It wasn't like any aircraft he had ever seen before. For a moment, John thought he was imagining it. Maybe he was too tired from work. But no, this was real. He watched as it descended rapidly, heading straight for the dense forest at the edge of town. John hesitated for a moment. His logical side told him to ignore it, go home, and forget about what he had just seen. But his adventurous side, the side that longed for something out of the ordinary, couldn't let it go. Without thinking much, he turned and walked towards the forest. It was a short distance, maybe a 10-minute walk from his house, but it felt like a lifetime. As he entered the thick woods, the evening air grew cooler, and the sounds of the town faded into silence. The forest was dark, and the only light came from the faint glow of the sky above. John kept walking, the strange object still fresh in his mind. He wasn't sure what he was hoping to find, but something told him that this was a chance he couldn't miss. The deeper he went into the woods, the more the air seemed to hum. It was almost as if the forest itself was alive, reacting to the presence of the strange object. John could hear the rustling of leaves under his feet and the occasional snap of a twig, but everything else was quiet. Too quiet. Then he saw it. The object had crashed into the ground. It wasn't just a smooth landing. It had fallen with a force that left a small crater in the dirt. Smoke still rose from the impact site, and the faint smell of burning metal filled the air. John approached carefully, his heart racing in his chest. He had no idea what he was about to find, but he knew it was something he could never have imagined. The crash site was like something out of a science fiction movie. There were strange symbols carved into the metal of the wreckage, symbols that looked nothing like any language John had ever seen. The metal was smooth and shiny, reflecting the dim light of the evening. The object was unlike any human technology he had ever encountered. John's eyes scanned the wreckage, but there was no sign of life. He felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Maybe it had been empty after all. Maybe it was just a piece of junk that had fallen from the sky. But then, he heard a noise, a faint groan, like someone in pain. His heart skipped a beat. He turned quickly, searching for the source of the sound. He stepped carefully around the wreckage and looked towards the edge of the crash site. There, half hidden behind a fallen tree, lay something, or someone. John's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman. She was lying on the ground, her body covered in dirt and debris. Her long hair was tangled, and her clothes were torn. But what struck John most was the way she looked. Her skin had a faint, glowing shimmer to it, like a faint trace of light that couldn't quite hide. Her face was pale, but there was a strange beauty about her, something otherworldly. John froze. He had never seen anyone like her before. And she wasn't human, not in the way he understood people to be. Her eyes, large, dark, and full of fear, met his for a moment, and she tried to speak, but her words were nothing more than a series of weak, incomprehensible sounds. He didn't know what to do. His first instinct was to run, to get away from the strange woman and the wreckage, but something kept him rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes, or maybe it was the feeling that his life was about to change in a way he couldn't understand. Without thinking, John dropped to his knees beside her. He gently placed his hands on her shoulders, checking for any signs of injury. She was cold to the touch and her breathing was shallow, but she was alive, that much was clear. "Are you okay?" John asked, his voice shaking slightly. He wasn't sure why he was asking. She obviously wasn't okay. She was hurt, and whatever had brought her here was far beyond his understanding, but he had to say something. The woman's lips parted slightly, and she whispered something that John couldn't understand. The words were too foreign, too strange, but there was no mistaking the fear in her voice. John didn't know what to do next, but he couldn't just leave her there. He knew he had to help her. With all the strength he could muster, he gently lifted her into his arms, carefully avoiding any sharp edges of the wreckage. He felt her shiver as he carried her out of the woods, but he kept moving forward. The only thing that mattered now was getting her to safety. As he walked back home, 1,000 questions ran through his mind. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why was she here, of all places? But deep down, John already knew. This was no accident. His life was about to change forever, and the woman in his arms, she wasn't just any stranger. She was someone who had come from somewhere far beyond the stars. Joe. Hen had always been a logical man. He liked to believe that the world around him could be explained by science and reason. But as he walked back through the dense woods, carrying the mysterious woman in his arms, his mind raced with thoughts he couldn't fully grasp. What had just happened? Was this some kind of dream? Or worse, had he just gotten caught in something far beyond his control? The woman, whose name he still didn't know, had not spoken since he found her. Her fragile body was limp in his arms, her breathing shallow but steady. Her strange, otherworldly beauty only added to the mystery. John tried to keep calm, but his thoughts kept spiraling. Every moment that passed, the reality of the situation grew more overwhelming. When he reached his small house, he quickly took her inside, gently laying her on the couch. The house, small and cozy, had always felt like a sanctuary for him, quiet, simple, and comfortable. But now, as he stood over this mysterious alien woman, it suddenly felt too small, as if the walls were closing in on him. John paced nervously around the room. He didn't know what to do next. He'd never been good in emergencies, never had to deal with a life-or-death situation. And this was unlike anything he had ever imagined. What was she? Where did she come from? Why was she here? John's eyes kept darting to her face. Despite the dirt, the bruises, and the clear signs of exhaustion, there was a certain grace about her. Her eyes, dark and full of mystery, seemed to follow his every movement. The moment their gazes met, John felt a strange pull, something that tugged at his very soul. It was as if he was meant to be here, with her, at this moment. He sat down next to her, carefully reaching for the glass of water on the table. "You need to drink," he murmured, his voice soft and steady. But as he gently brought the glass to her lips, she didn't respond. Her eyes fluttered slightly, and for a brief second, John thought she might be waking up. But then something strange happened. The woman's fingers twitched, almost as if responding to the glass of water. She reached out slowly, hesitated for a moment, and then touched his hand. John's heart skipped a beat. Her touch was cold, but not in the way he expected. It wasn't just the chill of someone who had been in the woods too long. No, it felt as though her skin was made of something that didn't belong to this planet at all. It was different, alien. "Who are you?" John whispered, his voice barely above a breath. His mind was racing. She had to be from somewhere far away, but where? And why had she come to Earth? Did she crash here by accident, or was there a purpose behind it all? The woman's lips parted, but her voice came out in soft, broken syllables. It was unlike anything John had ever heard before, like music, but distorted, the sounds unfamiliar. It was a language that seemed to carry weight, a deep, ancient tone that spoke of history, of civilizations long gone. She seemed to struggle with each word, but she was trying to communicate. John leaned in closer, focusing on her every movement. "I don't understand," he said, his frustration mounting. "Please, tell me who you are." The woman's eyes flickered, and John noticed something that hadn't been there before, a subtle glow beneath her skin. At first it was faint, barely noticeable, but as she spoke again, her skin seemed to shimmer with light, almost as though it was alive. Her voice grew stronger, the words still foreign, but there was a clarity in her gaze now, as if she was finally able to connect with him in some way. Zara, she whispered. John's heart skipped. Zara. It was her name, and yet it felt so strange on his tongue. The name sounded foreign, distant, but the way she said it, the way it left her lips, was enough to make him believe it was real. She was real. Zara, he repeated, trying to commit the name to memory. Where are you from? How did you get here? He didn't expect an answer, but the question escaped before he could stop it. Zara closed her eyes briefly, her body trembling as if the effort to speak had drained her. Slowly, she reached out again, touching John's arm this time, her fingers lingering just long enough to send a shiver down his spine. Her eyes met his again, and this time, there was something deeper there. A warning. A plea. John understood it, even without words. She wasn't just some lost traveler. There was something more, something important about her. Zara's lips parted once more, but instead of speaking, she gestured toward her chest. John watched her closely. It wasn't a simple gesture. It felt like she was showing him something vital, something that connected them. She was telling him to look deeper. Confused, John looked down at her chest. There, just beneath the collar of her torn, ragged clothing, was a symbol. It was faint, glowing ever so slightly in the dim light of the room. The symbol was like nothing John had ever seen. It looked like a combination of geometric shapes and lines, intricate and complex, glowing with a strange energy. Zara's eyes flickered toward it, and her hand reached up weakly to touch the symbol. She winced in pain, but the glow became more intense as she did. John reached for it, almost instinctively, and when his fingers brushed against the symbol, something remarkable happened. A surge of energy pulsed through him, like an electric shock. His body tensed, and for a brief moment, he felt connected to Zara in a way he couldn't explain. It was as if their minds had momentarily intertwined. He pulled his hand back, heart racing. What was happening? What was this symbol? Zara's gaze softened, and for the first time since they had met, she smiled. Just slightly, but enough for John to knee. How that, in her own way, she trusted him. This was no ordinary encounter. It wasn't just some random crash or strange accident. Zara was here for a reason, and John, whether he liked it or not, was now part of her story. As the night grew darker, John sat by her side, his mind swirling with questions, his heart pounding with the realization that his life had just become something far more extraordinary than he could have ever imagined. The days following Zara's arrival were a blur for John. The quiet routine of his life had been shattered, replaced by constant questions, strange occurrences, and an ever-growing sense of uncertainty. At first, he had treated Zara like an injured stranger, simply offering her food, water, and shelter. But the more time he spent with her, the more he realized that he wasn't just caring for a wounded alien woman. He was becoming part of something far larger than himself. Zara had slowly begun to regain her strength. She no longer lay motionless on the couch, her body weak and unresponsive. Now she was sitting up, though she still spent most of her time in silence, her dark eyes always watching John with an intensity that made him uneasy and curious all at once. But there was something else happening, something John couldn't explain. Zara had become more than just a guest in his home. She was becoming a mystery he couldn't stop trying to unravel. Every time their eyes met, it felt as though they were communicating without words. John didn't understand how or why, but there was a deep connection between them, one that was impossible to ignore. It was subtle at first, just fleeting glances or moments when their fingers would brush by accident. But it grew stronger with each passing day. John had always been a man of science, someone who believed in logic and reason, but Zara defied all that. She was a living puzzle, a riddle he couldn't solve, and yet he found himself drawn to her. It wasn't just her beauty, it was something else, something in the way she moved, in the way she held herself as though she carried the weight of the universe on her shoulders. They spent hours together, trying to communicate. At first, it was difficult. Zara's language was foreign to John, a mixture of strange sounds and clicks that he couldn't replicate. But somehow they managed to make sense of it. She would point to things in the room and say their names in her language, and John would repeat them in English. Slowly, they began to bridge the gap between their worlds, learning from each other in quiet, tender moments. One evening, as they sat together in the dim light of his living room, John decided to try something different. He had been thinking about the symbol on Zara's chest, the one that seemed to glow with strange energy every time he touched it. What was it, and why did it affect him so strongly? "Zara," John began, his voice softer than usual. "What is this symbol on your chest? It's like it has power." Zara looked down at the symbol, her expression unreadable. She placed her hand over it, and for a moment the glow intensified. John leaned forward, his curiosity burning brighter than ever. She hesitated before responding, her voice low and melodic as she spoke. "It's a mark, a symbol of my people. We are the last of our kind. The symbol is a part of who we are, what we represent. It holds the history of our civilization, of our survival." John's heart skipped a beat. Survival? What did she mean by that? He could sense there was more to her words, a depth of meaning that she wasn't sharing. "But what happened to your people?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara's eyes softened with sorrow, and she looked away, as if the question had stirred up painful memories. "We were destroyed," she said quietly. "A war came, and it wiped us out. I was the last to escape, the only one left." John's heart sank as he listened. He could feel the weight of her words, the pain and loss that she carried with her. She had been alone for so long, fleeing from a past that had torn apart her entire world. And here she was, on Earth, a stranger in a foreign land, and yet she wasn't entirely alone anymore. John didn't know how to respond. He wanted to tell her that he was sorry, that he couldn't imagine what she had gone through. But words felt insufficient. Instead, he just sat there beside her, not knowing what to say, but hoping his presence would offer some comfort. It was then that something unexpected happened. Zara's hand, which had been resting on her symbol, shifted slightly. She looked at John, her eyes locked onto his. There was something in her gaze, something powerful. Without warning, she reached out and touched his arm. At first, the touch was light, barely a caress. But as her fingers made contact with his skin, John felt a jolt of energy. It was like a spark had ignited between them, something raw and undeniable. The connection between them flared, and for a moment John felt as though his mind was opening up, like he was seeing the world through Zara's eyes. He saw flashes of distant stars, alien landscapes, and the devastation of her home planet. He felt her fear, her grief, and her determination to survive. It was overwhelming, but it was also beautiful. It was like he was experiencing her past, her emotions, as if they were his own. John gasped, pulling his hand away from her in shock. He was breathless, as though he had just run a marathon. "What was that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What did you do to me?" Zara's expression was unreadable, her eyes soft yet intense. She didn't speak, but there was a quiet understanding between them. The connection they had just shared was not of this world. It was more than physical. It was something deep, something spiritual. I don't know, John said, his voice thick with confusion. But it felt like you were in my head, like I was seeing your memories. Zara nodded, her gaze distant. "It's called the bond," she said softly. "It's something that happens when we find someone we are meant to be with. It's rare, but it's powerful. And when it happens, it changes everything." John's heart raced. "What do you mean?" He tried to process her words, but his mind was overwhelmed with what he had just felt. Zara's lips parted, but instead of speaking, she simply touched her chest where the symbol still glowed. "This symbol is more than a mark," she said quietly. "It's the key, and now you and I are bound by it." John stared at her, still unsure of what was happening, but deep down he felt it, the bond. It was undeniable, as though something inside him had shifted. His life was no longer just his own. It was tangled up with Zara's in ways he couldn't explain. And for the first time since he had found her, John knew that his life was never going to be the same again. John couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The connection he had with Zara, the bond that had formed between them, was both exhilarating and unnerving. Every time he looked at her, he felt an unspoken understanding, a deep sense of trust and connection. But there was a weight to it, something dark lingering in the corners of his mind. He had no idea what the future held, but he was beginning to suspect that the peaceful life he once knew was slipping away from him, and fast. The nights were the worst. John had always loved the quiet of the evening, the stillness of the night air. But now, as he lay in bed, his thoughts wouldn't let him rest. Zara's presence, though calming in some ways, had also awakened a deep sense of fear. She was a survivor, but survival didn't come without cost. And whatever had destroyed her people, whatever had brought her to Earth, wasn't finished with her yet. John woke up one morning to find Zara standing by the window, staring into the distance. Her back was to him, but he could feel the tension in the room. It was as if something was pulling at her, calling to her from beyond. For a moment, John thought she hadn't heard him, but then she turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked quietly, her voice low, almost a whisper. John's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. There was something in her eyes, something that sent a wave of dread through him. The fear in her gaze was unmistakable. "They're coming," she said simply. "The ones who followed me. They've found us." John's blood ran cold. Who's coming?" He stood up quickly, his mind racing. He had known it was too good to be true, that somehow the peaceful life they had tried to build together would be torn apart. But this? The coldness in Zara's voice made it real. It wasn't just a fear, it was a warning. Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to the small table where the remains of her ship had been placed, a collection of debris she had taken from the wreckage. Her fingers brushed over the objects carefully, as if they were reminders of her past, a past she hadn't spoken much about. "The empire that destroyed my world," she began, her voice tinged with bitterness. "They don't stop, they never stop hunting, and now they've come for me." John's mind reeled. "The empire? What do you mean? What kind of empire could destroy your entire planet?" Zara closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. It's not just a military force. It's a regime built on conquest and control. My people were their last obstacle, and when they took us down, they left nothing in their wake. I barely escaped, but not without consequences. She looked at John, her eyes dark with sorrow. I'm the last of my kind. John felt a weight settle in his chest. He had no idea the depth of what she had experienced, the trauma that she carried, but the fear in her eyes told him everything. This wasn't just some misunderstanding. This wasn't some random group of bandits. The people who were after Zara were ruthless, powerful, and they weren't going to let her escape a second time. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted their conversation, a sharp knock on the door. It was quick, deliberate, and John froze. His heart pounded in his chest as he glanced at Zara, who looked like she had just seen a ghost. Who is that? John asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Zara's face went pale and she stood up slowly, her movements stiff with fear. They've found us, she whispered. It's too late. John's stomach twisted. He had no idea what to do. Should he open the door? Should he run? His mind was a swirl of panic, but Zara's calmness in the face of danger gave him a shred of courage. He wasn't going to back down, not when she needed him most. He approached the door slowly, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. But before he could open it, the door creaked and slammed against the wall, as if someone had forced it open from the other side. John's heart leaped into his throat as he stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock. Standing in the doorway was a figure, tall, cloaked in dark armor, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the room. The figure didn't speak at first. It just stood there, its presence suffocating. Zara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. No, it can't be. You're one of them. The figure stepped forward, its footsteps heavy and purposeful. You cannot escape, Zara. The voice came, cold and mechanical. It was deep, almost artificial, but there was a hint of something more, something ancient in the tone. You are the last of your kind, and you belong to the Empire. Come with me. John felt his pulse quicken. What do you want with her? He demanded, his voice cracking with fear. He stepped in front of Zara instinctively, not knowing if he could fight whatever this thing was, but refusing to let it take her without a fight. The figure didn't even glance at John. Its gaze remained fixed on Zara. And it is not your place to protect her, it said, almost mockingly. She is not yours to defend. Zara's expression hardened, and for the first time, John saw a glimpse of the power she held within herself. She stepped forward, her body radiating an energy he hadn't seen before, an energy that seemed to pulse from the very core of her being. I will never go back to you, Zara said firmly, her voice ringing with defiance. I would rather die than return to the empire that destroyed my people. The figure's eyes glowed brighter, the air in the room thick with tension. Then you will die, it said, raising a strange weapon, one that hummed with an eerie metallic sound. John's heart was racing. He had no idea what to do, but he couldn't just stand there and watch Zara be taken. She had already lost so much. She had given him a chance at something more, something beyond his simple life. He wasn't going to let her die, not without trying. Before the figure could act, Zara did something unexpected. She moved with incredible speed, her hand glowing as she reached out, touching the figure's chest. The energy that pulsed from her was unlike anything John had ever felt. The figure froze, its body shuddering as if it had been struck by a powerful force. Zara's face was fierce, her determination shining through her fear. You will not take me, she said, her voice a quiet promise. Not today. The figure faltered, its eyes dimming, but the battle wasn't over. The Empire would not give up easily, and John knew that this moment was just the beginning. The true fight was about to start. John had never been in a situation like this before. Fear wasn't something he was familiar with, not the kind of fear that gripped him now, the kind that twisted his stomach into knots and left his heart racing in his chest. The figure in the doorway was like something out of a nightmare, and he threat it posed was real, not imagined. He stood there frozen as the figure's red eyes glowed ominously, piercing through the dim light of the room. Zara, standing just behind him, was no longer the fragile, injured woman he had taken in days ago. She had changed, transformed somehow. There was an undeniable strength in her now, a calm power that emanated from her as she faced the figure with defiance. Yet, even with that power, the danger was clear. The Empire's agent hadn't just come to find her, it had come to take her back, and it wouldn't stop until it had done so. But John wasn't ready to give up, not without a fight. Zara, he whispered urgently, not taking his eyes off the figure. We can't stay here, we need to leave, now. Zara didn't need to be told twice. She was already moving, her gaze never leaving the figure that still stood in the doorway, its weapon humming with a menacing energy. With one swift motion, she reached out and yanked John's arm, pulling him toward the back door. The agent didn't move at first, watching them with an unsettling stillness. Then, as they reached the door, the figure took a step forward. "You cannot escape, Zara. The Empire will find you, wherever you go." The door slammed open with a crash as John and Zara rushed outside into the cold night. The air felt sharp, stinging their skin, but it was freedom, brief, uncertain freedom. The woods surrounding John's home were thick, the trees casting long, dark shadows under the pale moonlight. They couldn't stay on foot for long, but it was a start. The further they could get from the agent, the better. John's mind was spinning. He had no plan, no idea where they were going. All he knew was that the enemy was closing in, and Zara's life, his life, was in danger. He had never been someone to think on his feet, but he had no choice now. If he didn't act fast, they would be called, "Kate, and then what? Zara," John breathed, struggling to keep up with her quick, purposeful pace. "Where are we going?" Zara didn't look at him but kept moving forward. Her movements swift and fluid like she was a part of the night itself. "There's a place," she said, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. "A safe haven. But it's far from here. We need to cross the border into the old forest. It's hidden. Only those who are meant to find it will." John didn't ask for more details. He trusted her, even though he had no idea what she was talking about. The old forest, whatever that was, sounded like the kind of place someone would run to if they had no other choice. They pushed deeper into the woods, the trees growing thicker around them. The further they went, the more John felt as though they were being pulled into something larger, something he couldn't comprehend. Zara was more than a woman on the run. She was a key to something ancient and powerful, and he had somehow found himself entwined in it. "What are they going to do to you if they catch you?" John asked, his voice shaky. He was trying to keep calm, but every second spent running felt like a countdown, and the agent's words kept replaying in his mind. Zara didn't answer at first, but her expression darkened. "They'll use me, my people. They were their greatest threat, and now, I am the last of them. If they control me, they control everything. They will rebuild their empire, and no one will be able to stop them." John's stomach churned. He didn't fully understand, but he knew enough. This wasn't just about a woman on the run. This was about survival on a galactic scale. Zara wasn't just a refugee, she was a weapon, and if the Empire had her, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Then we have to stop them," John said, more to himself than to Zara. His voice was filled with determination, but deep inside, he wasn't sure how he could possibly help. He was just a regular guy, a man who worked a 9-to-5 job and spent his evenings alone. But, standing next to Zara now, he realized that this wasn't about normal lives anymore. This was a fight for something much bigger. Zara stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her eyes, though tired, held a fire that John had never seen before. "You don't understand," she said, her voice harsh. "This isn't something you can fight with a weapon or a plan. You cannot stop the Empire with force. What they want isn't something you can just kill or outrun. They want control over all of us." John shook his head, frustration building in his chest. "So what do we do? Sit here and wait for them to take you back?" Zara's eyes softened for a brief moment, and she stepped closer to him. Her presence, once foreign and distant, now felt like something grounding, something real. "There's another way," she said quietly. "But it's dangerous, and I don't know if you're ready for it." John's heart skipped. "What are you talking about?" Zara took a deep breath, her gaze growing distant. "The bond between us," she said, her voice almost like a whisper. "It's not just a connection, it's a link that can be used to fight back." John frowned, trying to understand what she meant. "You mean the energy? The thing that happened when we touched?" Zara nodded, her eyes locking onto his. "Yes, but it's more than just that. The bond allows us to share strength, energy. It connects us in ways that go beyond anything I've known. Together, we could fight back. Together, we can do what neither of us could do alone." John felt his breath catch in his throat. The idea of using the bond between them to fight the Empire felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Could they really do it? Could they fight the Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy, with the strange energy that existed between them? "I don't know if I'm ready for that," John admitted, his voice shaking. Zara's expression so evident. "None of us are, but if we don't try, we will lose everything." John looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't feel like an ordinary man caught in a strange situation. He felt like something more. The bond between him and Zara had opened a door to possibilities he hadn't even dreamed of. It was terrifying, but in the midst of the chaos, it was the only chance they had. "Then let's do it," John said, determination building in his chest. "Let's fight." Zara nodded, her eyes fierce with the same resolve. "Then we move, now. The Empire will follow us, but we won't run anymore. This time, we fight." And as the two of them moved deeper into the unknown forest, ready to face whatever lay ahead, John knew that the real battle was just beginning. The night stretched on, its oppressive silence broken only by the rustling of the trees as John and Zara ventured deeper into the forest. The old woods, shrouded in mystery and shadows, had always seemed peaceful, but now they felt like a labyrinth, an endless maze, and every step they took felt like it was leading them into the unknown. The faint glow of Zara's symbol was the only source of light in the otherwise pitch-black darkness. John's mind raced with everything he had learned. The Empire, the relentless agents after Zara, the bond between them, everything felt like it was unfolding too quickly, and he was struggling to keep up. He had no real plan, no experience with the kind of war they were about to face. But Zara, she had been running, surviving, fighting for so long. There was something she wasn't telling him, something deeper in her past, and he could feel it. Every word, every gesture hinted at a greater truth. "We're getting closer," Zara said, her voice steady, though the tension in her posture was clear. John wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. He was about to ask her what she meant when she abruptly stopped, her hand outstretched, palm facing the path ahead. "Stay quiet," she whispered urgently. "Someone's coming." John froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He strained to listen, but the night seemed unnervingly silent. For a long moment, there was nothing, until a faint sound reached his ears. Footsteps, light, purposeful. Zara's body tensed beside him. She raised her hand, signaling for him to stay hidden in the shadows. John instinctively crouched low, pressing himself against the rough bark of a nearby tree. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, out of the shadows ahead, a figure emerged. But it wasn't an Empire agent. John's breath caught in his throat as the person stepped into the dim moonlight. It was another person, a woman dressed in dark, practical clothing. Nothing that screamed authority, but there was a calm strength in her posture. Her hair was long and wild, with streaks of silver running through it, and her eyes, piercing blue, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the area carefully. Zara's stance relaxed slightly, but she didn't step forward. Instead, she kept her voice low, her words sharp. "I didn't think you would come." The woman's lips curled into a faint, almost amused smile. "You didn't think I'd leave you to deal with this mess alone, did you?" Her voice was warm, yet held a certain edge that only added to her mysterious presence. John was still crouched, watching this exchange with growing confusion. He had no idea who this woman was, but the moment Zara and she spoke, something shifted. The air felt charged, like two long-lost allies reconnecting. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. "You're sure it's safe?" The woman nodded. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't." John could sense that Zara trusted her, but there was something else, a hesitation, an unspoken history between them. He couldn't help but feel like he was walking in on something private. Slowly, Zara stepped into the open, and John followed cautiously, unsure of what to expect. The woman didn't seem hostile, but the tensio, and in the air, was palpable. "Who is this?" John asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Zara turned to him. "This is Kayla. She's an ally, someone who can help." Kayla gave John a knowing look, almost as if she were appraising him. "Help? That's one way to put it." John didn't know what to say. His mind was still processing the fact that Zara was now introducing him to someone. But the way Kayla spoke, there was something off about her presence. It wasn't that she seemed unfriendly, but she was dangerous in a way John couldn't quite put his finger on. Zara, sensing his discomfort, gave him a reassuring glance. "Kayla's been helping those who've run from the Empire for years. She knows how to hide, how to survive." Kayla's lips twisted into a wry grin. "Surviving is easy. Hiding's the hard part." John's confusion deepened, but before he could ask any more questions, Kayla motioned for them to follow her. "We don't have time for questions right now. You're both coming with me. It's the only chance you have." Zara nodded without hesitation. She moved swiftly, her steps confident and purposeful as she followed Kayla through the dark woods. John trailed behind them, his mind reeling from the sudden shift in direction. This wasn't how he thought things would go. He had imagined the next step would be one of running, hiding, or fighting. But now, it seemed like the game had changed entirely. They walked in silence for what felt like hours. John's legs ached, but he kept pushing forward, his eyes scanning the woods around them. Every crack of a twig underfoot, every distant sound made him tense, but Kayla remained calm, as though she knew exactly where they were going and what to expect. Finally, they came to a clearing. The trees opened up to reveal a small hidden structure, a cabin, tucked away in the heart of the forest. It was well concealed, almost invisible if you didn't know where to look. Kayla led them inside, where the air was thick with the scent of herbs and wood smoke. Inside, the space was small but functional. The cabin was filled with strange, unfamiliar objects, pieces of tech that John didn't recognize, old books with worn covers, maps of star systems and planets with markings that made no sense to him. It was a place that spoke of secrets, survival, and a past hidden deep in the shadows. Kayla gestured for them to sit by a small fire burning in the center of the room. "We're safe here. For now." John sat down cautiously, still unsure of what to make of Kayla and her sudden appearance. He glanced at Zara, but she seemed completely at ease in Kayla's presence, as though they had known each other for years. "Zara, you've been running from the Empire for too long," Kayla began, her voice steady, serious. "You can't keep hiding. They're relentless." Zara's expression darkened. "I know, but I didn't think I had any choice." "You always have a choice," Kayla replied. "But now, we need to make sure that choice counts. The Empire isn't just coming for you. They're coming for all of us. We can't let them win." John's head spun as he listened. He had no idea what Kayla meant, but he could feel the gravity of her words. The Empire wasn't just after Zara, it was after everyone who had fought back, and if they didn't act fast, the consequences would be catastrophic. "What do we do now?" John asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind in his mind. Kayla looked at him, her piercing blue eyes sharp with intent. "Now we fight back. We gather those who are willing to join us. We strike at the Empire's heart." Zara's eyes met his, a look of determination in her gaze. For the first time since they had met, John felt the weight of what they were about to face. The choice was clear now. There was no turning back. Kayla stood, her movements purposeful. "Prepare yourselves. The war isn't over. It's just beginning." The weight of Kayla's words settled over John like a heavy cloak. "Now, we fight back." The words had been simple, yet profound, and they echoed in his mind as the fire in the small cabin flickered and crackled. It was a promise, but also a warning. The Empire wasn't just after Zara, it was after all of them. If they didn't act quickly, if they didn't strike now, the balance of power could tip forever in the Empire's favor. Zara wasn't just a woman to be protected anymore. She was a symbol of hope, of resistance. She was the key to everything. John hadn't asked for any of this. He had been a regular guy with a regular life, until Zara crashed into his world. Now, it seemed like he had no choice but to join a fight he never imagined himself in. A fight for a future he barely understood. The Empire's reach was vast, its power unimaginable. But Zara wasn't just any alien. She had the strength to challenge them. And now she was asking John to stand by her side. His heart was torn. His life, his normal, simple life, had disappeared the moment he had helped Zara. But that was the reality now. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Kayla's words still lingered in his mind as they gathered around the table in the cabin. They had to make a choice that would change everything. "I know you don't fully understand what this means, John," Zara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but John could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had seen so much, endured so much. "But we're not just fighting for me. We're fighting for anyone who has ever been oppressed, anyone who has suffered under the Empire's rule." John swallowed hard. "I didn't sign up for any of this," he said, his voice unsteady. "I'm just a guy. I don't have anything special. I don't know how to fight." Zara leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "What makes you special isn't what you know," she said quietly. "It's who you are. It's your heart, your will to protect others. That's why you're here. You helped me. You didn't have to, but you did. And now, you have a choice. You can turn your back on all of this, or you can stand with us, with me." John's chest tightened. He had no idea what he was doing. The fear he had felt earlier, the uncertainty, the panic was still there. It hadn't gone away. But the more he thought about Zara, about everything she had lost, about everything she had fought for, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting for something worth living for. "Why me?" John asked quietly. "Why not someone else? Someone who actually knows how to fight?" Zara looked down for a moment, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the map spread out on the table before them. The lines marked with places she had been, places she had escaped. and places where she had fought. "Because I believe in you, John," Zara said softly, her voice full of conviction. "The Empire wants to control everything. They think they can break us, but they can't break you. You've already proven that." The words hit John like a wave. He had never thought of himself that way. He was just a guy trying to get through life. But now, standing here, facing the reality of what was at stake, he realized something. He had already made his choice. The question wasn't whether or not he could do this. It was whether he could live with the consequences of not trying. But even as he felt his resolve solidify, the fear lingered. The fight ahead wasn't just against the Empire. It was against a force much larger than anything he could imagine. The Empire's reach was vast, and they wouldn't stop until they had Zara, or worse, until they had everything she had left. Kayla, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her tone sharp and commanding. "We don't have time for doubts, John. The longer we wait, the stronger they get. They've already started hunting you, and if we don't make our move soon, they will take over everything. The Alliance is owing, but we need you to help lead it. We need you to be the one to rally people, not just for Zara, but for the future." John looked from Kayla to Zara, the weight of their words pressing down on him. He wasn't a leader, he wasn't a soldier, but the fire in their eyes, the urgency in their voices, it stirred something in him. A desire to fight back, not just for Zara, but for himself, for the world that could still be. He took a deep breath and stood up. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos raging in his mind. "I'm in. I'll help. I'll fight. But what do we do first? How do we even begin?" Kayla's lips twisted into a sharp grin. "We strike at their supply lines first, hit them where it hurts. The Empire relies on a steady stream of resources to maintain its power. Disrupt that, and we cripple their ability to control the galaxy." Zara nodded. "We need to gather support from the other planets, from the people who are still fighting back. There are more of us than you think, John. Together, we can stand against them." John's heart was racing now. The reality of what they were about to do was starting to sink in. They weren't just going to survive, they were going to fight back, and they were going to win. But as he looked at Zara, he realized that this wasn't just a fight for freedom, it was a fight for love. She had trusted him, brought him into her world, and now he was part of something bigger, something that mattered. "I'm ready," John said, his voice firm. "Let's do this." Zara's eyes softened, and for a brief moment she smiled, a smile filled with gratitude and hope. "Together we'll win, John. Together we'll stop them." And as they prepared to leave the cabin, the fire in their hearts burned brighter than ever before. The war was far from over. But with every step they took, with every choice they made, they moved closer to victory. John had made his choice, and in the end, it was the hardest and the most important one he'd ever have to make.